Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. The town of Harper's Glen was small, nestled in the rolling hills of rural America. Its streets were lined with maple trees, their leaves whispering secrets only the wind could understand. The heart of the town lay at the intersection of Main and Elm, where a quaint diner, a handful of antique stores, and the town library stood as pillars of community life. But beneath this picturesque exterior lay a lurking darkness, a darkness that would soon erupt with tragic force. Late into the chill of autumn, something unsettling began to unfold. The first signal came on a crisp October evening when Annie Pritchard, a local high school student known for her infectious laugh and boundless energy, failed to return home after cheerleading practice. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, her absence began to gnaw at the fringes of her family's heart, igniting a simmering panic. Her mother, Claire, was the first to sense the deviation from routine. Annie would never miss dinner, not with her favorite lasagna on the table. With a knot tightening in her stomach, Claire began to call Annie's friends, logging each unanswered phone call like a sinister countdown. When darkness fell and Annie still didn't come home, Claire dialed 911, her voice trembling as she reported her daughter missing. The call set off a chain reaction that would consume the town. Officers arrived at the Pritchard residence, faces grim, and the search began. Little did they know that what started as a simple missing persons report would soon plunge them into the depths of a harrowing investigation, one that would unearth secrets buried within the community secrets that would change Harper's Glen forever. The victim. Annie Pritchard was more than just a high school student. She was a beacon of hope in the tightly woven fabric of Harper's Glen. At 16, she exuded an exuberance that was palpable. Cheerleading, volunteering at the local shelter, and nurturing her growing passion for painting wrapped her life in a vibrant tapestry of youth. Pictures of her laughing with friends adorned the walls of the Pritchard home, each frame a captured moment of joy and innocence. But beneath the cheerful veneer lay the complexities that often go unnoticed. Annie's parents, Claire and Tom, had been navigating a rough patch in their marriage, whispers of discontent growing louder as time wore on. The unease at home weighed heavily on Annie, leaving her feeling helpless. Her artwork became her escape, a canvas where she poured her emotions into splashes of color and light. Friends often remarked how Annie could take the grayest day and splash it with rainbow hues. But inside, she felt a tempest brewing. It was during a routine school day, days before her disappearance, that Annie had approached her best friend, Lena, with a quiet urgency. "Can we talk?" she had asked, pulling Lena aside in the bustling hall. The concern in Annie's eyes was unsettling. She shared whispers of feeling watched, an unsettling sensation like being followed. But Lena chalked it up to typical teenage anxiety, never dreaming the words would echo hauntingly after Annie vanished. Those final days loomed like shadows over Harper's Glen as the air thickened with uncertainty. Annie's portrait hung in her classroom, a stark reminder of the girl who once filled its halls with laughter. Her absence now transformed the vibrant space into a cavern of whispers, each rumor feeding the growing dread that something had gone horribly wrong. The search for Annie Pritchard, the girl who seemed so full of life, had just begun, but the darkness was already closing in, eager to swallow what little light remained. The crime scene. The morning air on the day of Annie's disappearance was crisp and heavy with anticipation. Police had expanded their search area as more officers flocked to Harper's Glen, combing through wooded trails and nearby parks. The sun broke through the clouds, casting an eerie glow as the community rallied together, hoping for good news. But it was not hope that the officers stumbled upon just 2 days after she went missing. It was something far more sinister. In a secluded clearing off a little-used hiking trail, a dense thicket masked the truth. The bodies of the trees, ancient and resolute, watched silently as police discovered a woman's sweater snagged on a branch. Its colors, vibrant yet duller from the elements, offered a whisper of hope, paired with an atmosphere thick with foreboding. It was a significant lead, one that sent officers' hearts racing. But as they combed the surrounding area, grim realizations settled in. Moments later, a sergeant's call cut through the thick silence. It echoed back to the team, summoning everyone. In a state of unease, the officers approached a small clearing. The sun illuminated the scene, contrasting with the undeniable horror it presented. There, amidst the fallen leaves, lay Annie, her lifeless body sprawled across the ground. The serenity of the wooded area felt like an insult now. Annie's face bore signs of struggle and trauma, with bruises that told a harrowing story of desperate resistance. An autumn breeze swirled around them, carrying whispers no one wanted to hear. For the investigators, each detail melded into a melting pot of sorrow and urgency. They knew they were navigating a dark path, one that held mysteries they were determined to unravel. Crime scene investigators roped off the area, beginning their meticulous work as the town's heartbeat seemed to falter. Underneath the ancient oak's expansive branches, they collected evidence: strands of hair, a piece of fabric, and any trace left behind by her assailant. In that moment, the search for truth shifted from desperation to determination. They would bring justice for the girl who once painted the world in vivid colors, now reduced to a sorrowful memory in the trails of Harper's Glen. The early investigation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the once bustling town of Harper's Glen adopted a melancholic stillness. News of Annie Pritchard's tragic fate spread like wildfire, igniting fear and sorrow among its residents. Members of the community were left grappling with an unsettling reality. No one was safe, not even in their quiet corner of the world. Detective Rachel Bennett, a seasoned investigator with over a decade on the force, arrived at the police station for an urgent briefing. She was assigned to lead the case, a role she never relished taking on, especially under such grotesque circumstances. Her mind buzzed with questions as she reviewed the evidence file. Annie's brutalized body painted a picture of grievous violence that sent chills down her spine. Detective Bennett immediately held a meeting with the responding officers, piecing together the timeline of events surrounding Annie's disappearance. They meticulously retraced her last known movements, focusing on the day she vanishing after cheerleading practice. Each member of the team began reaching out to friends, acquaintances, and anyone who might have crossed paths with the vibrant girl, collecting stories, fragments of memory and clues that could unearth the truth. Interviews were peppered with frustration. Friends struggled to articulate incongruities, recalling vague instances of odd behavior, the uneasy feeling Annie had mentioned. The police soon realized that beneath the surface of the small-town charm lay hidden frictions and frailties. There were whispers of cliques and rivalries tied to the high school cheerleading squad, bitterness masked beneath the camaraderie. But amidst the chatter, one name repeatedly surfaced: Jacob Reynolds, a boy who had been seen with Annie on multiple occasions in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. While some painted him as a lovesick admirer, others warned of dark moods that lingered around him like a storm waiting to break. Detective Bennett felt an urgency build within her, a need to understand if Jacob was merely a victim of circumstance or a potential suspect in a case that had already stolen the innocence of their small town. The early investigation had begun. Driven by the resolute determination to carve a trail through the intricacies of grief, secrets, and desperation. With each piece of information, the threads of Annie's life began to weave together a narrative that demanded to be told, a narrative that might lead them to the truth. The dead ends as the days wore on into the second week following Annie Pritchard's disappearance. The initial fervor of the investigation dwindled as leads turned cold. Detective Rachel Bennett found herself buried beneath a mountain of paper, cross-referencing alibis and witness statements, each revealing more frustration than clarity. The light of hope faded, leaving a suffocating sense of despair hanging over Harper's Glen. The search for Jacob Reynolds, the promising lead, proved fruitless. When officers finally tracked him down, he was found rattling in the basement of his own despair. Jacob claimed he hadn't seen Annie in years, asserting they had only shared a few fleeting exchanges during school. His demeanor was erratic, eyes glazed over as he seemed to dance between agony and anger, which only deepened the questions swirling around his involvement. Engagement was a telltale sign of someone hiding in plain sight, but witnesses supporting his alibi trickled in, giving him an unyielding shield. He was in a different part of town the day Annie vanished, tangled in whatever struggles he had been facing, leaving detectives grappling with mounting frustration. With Jacob ruled out as a suspect, the investigation turned to a wider net, casting doubts on the community itself. Everyone became a potential person of interest: friends, teachers, even neighbors. As detectives interviewed residents, they unearthed whispers of complications from years past. A domestic dispute here, a property dispute there, fragments that felt inconsequential yet created a tapestry of distrust. The ancient oak trees under which Annie's body had been discovered stood silent witnesses as search parties combed through the woods again, hoping to find any overlooked clues. Detective Bennett and her team journeyed deeper into the thickets, retracing Annie's final steps. Yet, the forest seemed reluctant to give up its secrets. Evidence left behind evaded the meticulous searches, taunting them like a ghost haunting the investigation. As autumn fully set in, the skies dimmed overhead, casting shadows over the town. Annie's absence weighed heavy on the community's heart, making the onus of each sobering dead end feel personal. And while Detective Bennett remained resolute, determination turned to obsession. She spent countless nights in her office, staring at the photographs pinned to the board. Annie's smiling face stood in stark contrast to the relentless wave of unanswered questions. The clock was ticking, and with every passing moment, the trail to Annie's killer grew colder, slipping away like the cinders of a fading flame. A break in the case. The crisp October afternoon wore on, echoing the sorrow hovering over Harper's Glen. The community, exhausted from the relentless grief, was left to shoulder the burden of uncertainty. Detective Rachel Bennett felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. Their unspoken questions thickened the air. What? When? Why? It was just as Bennett made her usual late-night rounds through the files that a phone call shattered the silence of the station. The officer on the line, Officer Miguel Torres, relayed news with hurried urgency. "Detective, we've got something." A witness came forward. At the crack of dawn, Bennett met Officer Torres at a local coffee shop where the witness, an aging man named Harold Quinn, nervously fiddled with the creased edge of his newspaper. He had been walking his dog past the woods when he caught a glimpse of two figures arguing near the trail a week before Annie's body was discovered. Harold recalled the icy chill he felt when he recognized the taller of the two Jacob Reynolds. The other figure remained obscured, but Harold had caught enough to remember their silhouette. "It looked like they were having a serious spat, you know. Like something wasn't right," he explained, his face a mixture of concern and confusion. Bennett leaned forward, heart racing as she absorbed the details.
"Did you see what they were wearing?"
"Did you hear any names being said?" Questions tumbled from her lips, barely waiting for answers. Harold recalled a vivid detail. The other figure had distinctive, colorful sneakers that were hard to miss. The shoes sparked something in Bennett's mind. She remembered seeing similar footwear during one of the cheerleading events, worn by a junior acquaintance of Annie's. She took notes feverishly, feeling the pieces start to fit, tentative yet promising. Within a day, they located the individual Jeremy, a friend of Jacob's, and someone who had often been seen around the cheerleading squad. As Bennett sat across from him in an interrogation room, the air thickened with a quiet tension. Jeremy's anxious demeanor and guilt-ridden fidgeting signaled that he might have been harboring more than he let on. As Bennett prodded, Jeremy's shaky narrative began to unravel. He spoke of Jacob's volatile nature, how he had become increasingly obsessed with Annie, harboring darker intentions. The revelation struck Bennett like lightning, illuminating the shadows that had lingered so long. With Jeremy's confession and Harold's eyewitness account, a significant shift in the investigation materialized. It was a break that turned the investigation from speculation to direction. As the sun dipped low and the horizon simmered in the glow of dusk, Bennett lingered over her notes, the burgeoning storm inside her heart igniting with purpose. They were closer than ever, but the road to justice remained fraught with peril and uncertainty. An impending confrontation awaited them on the horizon. The suspect, as the autumn leaves blanketed the ground in hues of gold and rust. The atmosphere in Harper's Glen had thickened with the tension of a palpable storm. Detective Rachel Bennett knew the crucial moment had arrived. With Jeremy's testimony weighing heavily on her mind, she prepared herself to confront Jacob Reynolds, the young man whose name now clung to the murky depths of suspicion. A noticeable chill wafted through the interrogation room as Jacob entered, his demeanor an unsettling mix of bravado and anxiety. The corners of his mouth twitched, betraying the bravado he tried to project. Bennett studied him closely. His eyes darted around, seeking solace in the stark walls surrounding him, a reflection of the silent cage he now found himself in. "Jacob, we need to talk." Her voice was firm yet measured, seeking to pierce through his facade. Silence enveloped them for a moment. Bennett leaned closer, her gaze unyielding. "We have a witness, someone who saw you arguing with Annie the week before she disappeared. This has escalated." Jacob's bravado faltered, the color draining from his cheeks. The anger in his eyes wavered, replaced by a flicker of fear. "I wasn't arguing with her. We were just talking." "I swear." But Bennett pressed on, her voice steady. "Talking?" The way Jeremy described it, she paused, gauging Jacob's reaction. You were obsessed with her, weren't you? It pushed you over the edge. Jacob's shoulders stiffened, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. He opened and closed his mouth, words trapped in the clutches of his turmoil. Bennett noted the shiver that ran through him. Recognizing the battle within, he teetered on the precipice between a confession and further denial. Just leave me alone. He finally spat, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't. Oh, then tell us where you were the night she disappeared, Bennett replied, her voice steady yet coaxing, embodying the tension that crackled in the air. Jacob stumbled over his words, visibly agitated, thoughts racing but just out of reach. Detectives were clicking over details that could unravel the web he might have woven. Bennett shifted her approach, softening her tone. I want to help you, Jacob. If you didn't do anything, you have nothing to fear. But this could all go away if you just tell the truth. As the minutes slipped by, Jacob's defenses began to wane, crumbling under the weight of the mounting evidence. Sweat trickled down his brow. The walls seemed to close in around him as the truth clamored for release. I was up in the woods that night, he finally confessed, his voice quaking as his eyes dropped to the table. But I didn't mean for it to happen. The statement hung heavily in the air, a tipping point shattering the fragile veneer of innocence. A door now opened, leading to a darker truth that Bennett now sought to illuminate. Underlining the gravity of the moment, the investigation had spiraled into a labyrinth of desperation, and beneath it lay a chilling consequence. The trial, the courthouse in Harper's Glen, loomed like a sentinel over the fragile state of the community, its once gleaming facade now dulled by the weight of the tragedy that had unfolded. Local residents, eager to see justice served, filled the cramped gallery as the trial of Jacob Reynolds commenced. The air was thick with anticipation, a mix of emotions swirling around the attendees' sorrow, anger, and a hint of cautious hope. Detective Rachel Bennett sat in the front row, her expression resolute as she observed the proceedings unfold. She had worked tirelessly to bring the case to this pivotal moment, every detail scrutinized and every piece of evidence meticulously gathered. The grief that had enveloped the town following Annie Pritchard's death fueled her determination, while the memories of that vibrant girl haunted her thoughts. As the jury filed into the room, a hush fell over the crowd. Moments later, Jacob was ushered in, his demeanor a cloud of anxiety tempered by the reality of the courtroom. Today, the facade he had maintained began to crumble, piece by painful piece. The prosecution opened with a gripping narrative, reconstructing the timeline leading up to Annie's death. Eyewitness accounts, including Harold's description of the fight, intertwined with Jeremy's testimony, painting a vivid picture of a young man driven by obsession and rage. The evidence itself felt weighty, like an unyielding hand gripping the minds of those who heard it. As the defense attempted to counter, Jacob's lawyer presented a desperate plea, portraying him as a troubled boy, caught in the throes of adolescence, wrestling with inner demons rather than a calculated killer. They argued that circumstantial evidence should not carry the weight of a conviction. Indeed, Jacob was just a victim of circumstance. But the defense's arguments faltered as Bennett's meticulous work came to light, laying bare the truth in stark contrast to the shrouded doubts introduced by the defense. Witnesses filled the courtroom with testimonies that painted the chilling reality of that fateful night. The emotional toll weighed heavily on Jacob, who silently absorbed the impassioned testimonies laced with grief and sorrow. On the witness stand, Annie Pritchard's voice quivered as she recounted moments of joy and laughter shared with her daughter. The courtroom held its breath as she recalled the vibrant girl who would never again step through their front door. The pain resonated in every folded tissue, every tear that fell, striking a powerful chord within the jury. After days of harrowing testimonies, the moment arrived. The jury filed back into the room, hearts heavy and minds conflicted. A tense silence enveloped them as the foreman stood to read the verdict. The line between justice and failure lay bare before them, an ultimatum hanging in the air. Guilty of second-degree murder, the foreman declared, and the word echoed like thunder throughout the room. Jacob's visage shifted, a calamitous mix of disbelief and devastation washing over him. The weight of consequence settled upon him as his reality shifted irreversibly. The community, bound by pain, erupted into a mixture of relieved gasps and anguished sobs. An uncertain sense of closure signaled the beginning of healing, the shadows of grief responding to the light of justice. As Detective Bennett walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in days, illuminating the path forward. Harper's Glen, while forever changed, began to inch toward reconciliation. Yet, in the aftermath, the lingering question persisted. Would the scars of this tragedy ever truly heal? In the hearts of its residents, only time would tell. The aftermath. The conviction of Jacob Reynolds rippled through Harper's Glen, leaving a wake of anguish mingled with a bittersweet sense of relief. Days turned to weeks as the community attempted to redefine itself in the shadows of tragedy. Memorials sprang up in parks and schoolyards. Posters adorned with colorful depictions of Annie became shrines to her memory. Flowers bloomed amidst the sorrow, vibrant reminders of the light she had once brought into the lives of those who knew. Detective Rachel Bennett, though dedicated to her work, found herself grappling with the emotional toll. Late-night thoughts haunted her. Even with the case closed, remnants of guilt lingered in the recesses of her mind. Did they do enough? Could they have found Annie sooner? The question circled like a restless spirit, urging her to seek solace in the community she had fought valiantly to protect. In the weeks following the trial, Bennett attended vigils for Annie, standing alongside her parents as they shared poignant stories of their beloved daughter. Claire and Tom Pritchard, though forever transformed by grief, channeled their pain into activism, forming a foundation named after Annie to raise awareness about missing persons and help families navigate the tumultuous waters of loss. It was their way of ensuring that Annie's memory would not fade, that her name would serve as a beacon of hope for other families facing the same heart-wrenching ordeal. But not all aspects of the aftermath were about healing. Some in the community struggled to find closure. Anger and resentment lingered, creating fissures in relationships once tightly knit. Rumors circulated around town, each whisper driving wedges between friends and neighbors. The specter of betrayal danced through the streets of Harper's Glen, feeding suspicions and undermining trust. Bennett knew the discontent could not go unaddressed. She organized community meetings to foster dialogue, shoring up the frayed connections that tied families to their home. Through heartfelt conversations, she urged residents to share their fears, their grief, and their hopes for the future. Slowly, a web of solidarity began to weave back into the fabric of the town, reminiscent of the camaraderie that had once characterized their lives before the tragedy. As the seasons changed, so did the conversation. New stories began to emerge, tales of resilience catching fire among the hearts of the townspeople. Activists, influenced by Annie's story, began to stand up for those who had gone missing, transforming pain into purpose. Always honoring the girl who once dreamt of painting a world full. Though Bennett still felt the ache of loss, she found herself committing to the foundation, helping organize events and speaking at schools to share Annie's story. Each word she spoke was nurtured by unwavering resolve. One young life lost would not define the collective spirit of Harper's Glen. And together, they would restore the legacy of the bright girl whose laughter had once infused the walls of their quaint town. As winter set in, the first frost glimmered against the backdrop of change. The warmth from the community began to overcome the chill of devastation. The spirit of Annie Pritchard lived on, transcending through the hearts of those who vowed to keep her memory alive. No longer merely a ghost whispering through the trees, Annie's laughter now echoed in the kindness of neighbors and determination of friends as they turned their grief into a force for good. In the grief-stricken silence left in the wake of loss, a new life began to emerge, tempered by hope, connection, and an unyielding resolve for change. Direction. As snow began to blanket Harper's Glen in a soft, silent shroud, Detective Rachel Bennett stood on the fringes of the town park, gazing at the makeshift memorial that had become a sanctuary for all who mourned Annie Pritchard. Around her, families gathered, sharing warmth in the midst of winter's chill. The laughter of children pierced the air. Bennett felt an ache in her heart, the resolve inside her pulsing with the weight of the journey they had all endured. Annie's death had ripped through the fabric of their community, yet it had also forged a new strength born out of loss. The gatherings of families honoring her memory were testaments to resilience in the face of despair. The conversations that once brimmed with suspicion and anger had blossomed into discussions of hope and healing. As she watched the candles flicker under the soft glow of the winter stars, Bennett reflected on the lives she had touched through the investigation. Annie's story had compelled her not just to seek justice, but also to impact the lives of those who sought to carry on her legacy. Feeling the weight of kinship among her fellow townsfolk, she recognized that the journey of healing was ongoing, a mosaic of memories shaped by anguish, but ultimately colored by compassion. The detective turned away from the memorial, her heart steadied by the realization that grief was not a linear path, but rather a landscape of ups and downs, filled with moments of clarity and pain. Each step she took was filled with purpose. She would not forget those who grieved, nor the lessons learned in the unyielding battle against darkness. The echoes of Annie's laughter still resonated within her, a guiding force propelling her forward, reminding her to fight for justice, connection, and healing. In that moment, as the chill pressed against her skin, the warmth of community wrapped around her like a blanket. She took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp winter air mingled with the scent of pine and hope, understanding that together they would continue to honor Annie's spirit and inspire change. In the end, it was not simply about uncovering the truth, but about rekindling the light that darkness had sought to overshadow, a commitment toward a legacy that would fuel their resilience in the face of tragedy and keep the essence of Annie Pritchard alive.